So much pressure is put on young women about their image and their looks, and that it becomes like the primary value that people see in young women. And it's a very crushing feeling, I can imagine, to think that all you're valued for is your looks. I know in the past, whenever someone has judged me for my looks or my clothes, which doesn't happen very often as a man, I found it, ew, it's ugly. I don't like that. What's so important about it? I have other things that matter. So the thing is, you have something else that matters so much more than your looks and your image, and you need to key into that. And you need to continually tell yourself that your mind, your spirit, what you contribute to the world is infinitely more important than that image and that look. Now, it's easy for me to say that because still in the world, women are continually judged for their appearances and they're thought as hot or not hot. And, it's hard to let go of that because, it's where you get attention. But you need to divorce yourself from that and say that I want to cultivate a different quality that gets me attention. And I've noticed in my studies of history and in my observations of women, that women, and it's a generalization, so please excuse me and please forgive me for my mansplaining, but women have a different way of thinking than men. Now, this is hard to generalize because it crosses all kinds of gender boundaries, and there are plenty of men who have a more feminine mindset and women who have a masculine mindset, so please understand that. But I interviewed for Mastery several women scientists, and I noticed they had a different, more kind of holistic approach to looking at issues in science. It came from a different perspective, and it was the source of their power of creating something. I interviewed this woman, Yoki Matsuoka, for Mastery, who was a brilliant robotic engineer who came up with an incredible invention. And she had this more kind of interesting, holistic approach where she wasn't just looking at creating an arm, an artificial limb. She was looking at the whole body and how it operates. Women tend to see the larger picture. Men are more kind of focused in a narrower sense. And there's a good side to that, there's a disadvantage. But women tend to see the wider picture. They're also more attuned socially to what other people are thinking and feeling. Sometimes that's a bad thing, where you're too attuned to what people think about you, but it also makes you more empathetic. I wrote in The Laws of Human Nature about the female style of leadership, focusing on Queen Elizabeth I in England, and how it's a very, very powerful form of leadership. And I advise you to go look at that chapter and see what I was saying about that. I also have a chapter about gender and men and women and the different accessing for men their feminine side and for women their masculine side. The point of what I'm trying to say here is that you have your own natural genius that's different necessarily from me. You have a different approach to power. And some people have asked me to write a 48 Laws of Power for women. And I don't think I'll ever get there, unfortunately, because it would be too difficult for me to be able to do that. But you are dealing with different power issues. It's a lot harder for you because you're judged on higher standards. You do one small thing, if you're ever mean or something, people judge you negatively. But the point is that if you yourself value your thinking, your ideas, your creativity, or you contribute in the invisible realm that has nothing to do with appearances, the invisible realm, meaning the realm of ideas, even in a spiritual sense, that will be a value that will ground you in life as opposed to being lost in that hall of mirrors where everything is about appearances and image. So start your whole thing in life thinking, I'm not going to get lost in that. What I value more than anything else is my mind and developing it. And that's extremely important in this world where social media is dominating us. We all have really bad values, but that is a really good value to hold on to and cultivate throughout your life.
What is power? What does it mean to be a powerful person?
In our life, we can't control everything, right? You don't control who your parents are, where you were born into, the time that you live in. And so many circumstances that occur in your life are things that are random. They're just circumstances you have no control over. Okay? But the sense
for a human being to have no control over your life or anything around you, no control over your children, over your spouse, over your colleagues at work, over your boss, is terrible. It's a terrifying feeling, and we don't like it. So we try to gain some kind of power, some kind of control. But we're social animals, right?
Yeah.
And people are very tricky. I don't know if you've experienced how tricky people are. You probably have. They don't tell you what they're thinking. They wear these masks. They're very elusive. They smile and they say, "Oh, I love your podcast, Francesca." But deep down, they don't feel that at all, right? People are very tricky. They're very political. Okay. So power is the ability to understand the social elements of life, the political elements, the egos that people have, so that you can navigate this very tricky environment and not make so many terrible mistakes that you end up having trouble, causing yourself all sorts of problems. So you can gain a little degree of control over yourself, over your own emotions, over your own irrationality, and over the people around you. Not that you are going to be a master manipulator, but that you can see through the manipulations that other people are working on you and have more of a control over everything that's going on around you. To me, that is power.
And I can't wait to talk about all the things you mentioned, including manipulation and how to spot it.
Okay.
But first of all, I want to ask, what are some signs that someone is powerful, that you've met someone who's powerful?
Well, that's a very good question. It's hard to gauge how powerful a person is personally in their presence. Now, I know, for instance, I did a book with 50 Cent called The 50th Law. And in his presence, you can sense that this guy has power, right? But the way you judge a person's power is not their personal presence, but by their actions, by the results of things that they can get done. Now, a lot of that has to do with your appearance, how you appear to people, your charisma, how you come across, but also a lot of it. So sometimes somebody can appear to be very powerful. I don't know if you've had this experience, Francesca, but you'll be at work and you have a boss who appears to be very powerful, very strong, very aggressive, but actually their actions aren't effective. They don't get things done well. People don't like them, okay? So you have to learn to judge people by their actions, by the results of what they do. And that's what reveals whether a person is powerful or not. Sometimes people seem powerful, but they're actually very weak and insecure inside. So I like to look at the results. I like to see, oh, that company is doing really well. It's making a lot of money. Oh, that political figure is solid in his or her power. Or that artist is creating things that are lasting, that are very popular and successful. I like to look at the results and not get so bewitched by people's personal appearance.
It reminds me of a study I read, which was talking about power and influence and how it's made up of, charisma and the personal element you mentioned and appearance, but also competence. And if competence is lacking, it's just what you were talking about, then, the appearance and everything else doesn't matter at the end of the day. So it was competence that was most important, the skills. And so super interesting. And, you wrote about 48 laws, but are there some laws that you think are most important?
Well, everything depends on you as an individual, so some people have certain strengths, some people have certain character traits that lend themselves to a law or that they're not good at, that they should be good at. So one of the laws I think is very important is interaction with boldness. And what that means is when you begin a project, when you enter into a relationship, when you enter into any kind of business environment, the way you begin, the way you would present yourself, if it's bold, if you're confident, if you think this project is going to be extremely successful, it's going to do well, it infects other people. They get drawn into it. And because you appear confident, it makes it seem that you know what you're doing, that you have that competence that you mentioned, right? But we've all experienced this. If you're around somebody who's timid, who's insecure, who's anxious in a social situation, it makes you timid and anxious, right? But if you're around somebody powerful, you get caught up in it. So having that kind of boldness, people are in this world today, particularly now in 2026, people are too timid. They're so afraid. They're so afraid of being different from other people. They're so cowardly, right? They want to fit in. And I'm telling you, your boldness, you're not afraid to be different. You're not afraid to take risks is what will translate into power. That's a very, very important one. And there are others. It depends on the circumstances. So I have a law. I can't remember the exact title. It's about creating dependence. So if you're trying to have some power in this world, if you have a skill that nobody else has, if you have an ability that makes you different and unique, then you have power because you can't be replaced. But if you're working in an office or in some environment like that, and you're just like everybody else, you don't have that kind of irreplaceable quality. When you reach the age of 28, 29, or 30, they're going to find somebody younger who they can pay less to replace you. So not being replaceable, making it that people depend on you, you're the only person that can get something done, is an extremely, extremely powerful position to be in. Of course, the question is, how do you get into that position? And that's what I talk about in the chapter. So you have to kind of read that chapter, and I explain how you can accomplish that.
Can I ask you, how can you accomplish that?
Well, there are several ways you do that. So you have to think, first of all, in this particular business that you're in, whatever it is, right? What is that skill that I can do that nobody else can do, right? Okay, so there are going to be other people around you, and you're all going to basically have the same kind of training, the same background that makes you kind of similar, right? What is it that can make you stand out? What is the thing that you have, the skill, the power, the quality? It can be personal, it could be technical, that is different from everybody else. And then you lean on that skill and you make it very strong. And you make it clear to the people working in your business or wherever you are that to get rid of you is going to be very, very costly. Okay? So it depends on the job that you're in. I can't say a general strategy that'll work everywhere, but just focus on this one thing. If they want to fire me, they're going to pay a terrible price because they won't find anybody else that'll be able to do what I can do. So you need to find those things that you can do that nobody else can do, that they're not going to, then it's going to be very, very impactful and very painful for them to fire you, whatever that will be in your particular situation. Also, having a lot of allies within your company. So you have, you just don't rely on one person in the business. You just don't have like a boss who supports you. You have, in the different departments or different areas of your job, you have 3 or 4 people that like you, that are allied with you. And so to get rid of you is also going to cause friction in the company, and a lot of other people are going to be upset. I mean, Francesca, I could go into dozens of strategies on that, but that should give you a kind of idea. But I recommend reading that chapter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I encourage my listeners also to do that. And you mentioned before, that especially in today's day and age, 2026, people are more timid. I wanted to ask you, why is that?
Well, I don't mean to judge it so much, because there are reasons for these things. And, and I didn't grow up in this world that, in the internet age. I'm much older than that. So if I grow up now, if I had been born in the 90s or the 2000s, I would probably be the same as other people. It's very understandable. But A lot of it has to do with social media, to be quite frank. I mean, there are many causes for it, so I don't mean to make it simple, but one of the main causes is social media, because you become so hyper aware of what other people are doing around you, right? And you're so afraid of being different. You're feeling like if you're different from the group, people are going to judge you because you're so aware of what everybody else is doing. Back when I was growing up, people only my friends knew what I was up to, and only had interactions with them, right? And so to be different when I was growing up, to be a nonconformist was a lot easier and less painful. But nowadays, you want to fit in. You want to have the same tastes as other people. You want to have, you're all interested in the same memes. You focus on the same things on social media. And it gives incredible pressure for you to conform and to be like other people. And to be different, it seems painful, seems, something you don't want. The other thing is, this world has become much more chaotic and difficult than it was in my day, right? There were so many things that have intervened in the last 15, 20 years that can make people very timid and very conservative. So you had the crash in 2008, then you had COVID, right? And then you have all the disturbances, the financial things that are going on these days. It's a very, very chaotic, difficult world that people, particularly who are young, are having to navigate. And it's very stressful and it's very dangerous. So you naturally, when humans are faced with chaotic situations, they become conservative. They want to try and control everything. And so there's a lot less openness to being different, to being a nonconformist. But I tell people, so I wrote a book called Mastery. I don't know if you're familiar with the book Mastery.
Yeah.
But the source of your power in life, I don't care who you are or wherever you grew up or how old you are, the source of your power is being different from other people. It's your uniqueness. If you look at people in music or in film or in politics that are powerful, there is nobody else like them. They are unique. They're one of a kind. And every single person out there in your audience has that quality. You all have something unique about who you are. And when you lean into that, when you're strong on that, you're going to stand out from others and you're going to be powerful. But if you're so afraid and you're so wanting to be like other people and you're so worried about people's judgments and criticisms, then you're going to it's going to be very tough for you in life.
Absolutely. That makes so much sense. And I actually wanted to ask you, how do you go about finding that uniqueness and that source of power within? Do you have any practical strategies?
Well, you're asking all the tough questions.
Sorry.
I spend like hours trying to answer that. It's all right. It's all right. Well, in Mastery, I have a chapter on that. The first chapter, it's called Discover Your Life's Task. And I don't mean to brag or anything, but to me, it's the most important thing I've ever written. Because if you don't understand who you are as an individual, of what makes you unique, of what could possibly be the source of your success in life, you're going to have a very hard time, right? So you have to know who you are. You have to figure out the puzzle that you represent, okay? So the image that I try and tell people is your DNA that you have as an individual is unique. It's not like anybody else in the past, in the present, or in the future. Okay, so you are marked right there as an individual. You are completely unique the way your brain is wired, all right? And then you have your parents who are also have their own uniqueness, and they raised you. And so you're raised like nobody else in the world. And then you have friends and experiences when you're 3, 4, 5 years old that are unlike experiences of anybody else. All of that stamps you as somebody completely different, completely unique, okay? And when you're a child, when you're 3 years old, 4 years old, you kind of have a sense of that. You don't have to, it's not about words or anything that you can naturally think. It's an inclination, it's an impulse, it's an intuition. I'm attracted to sports. I'm attracted to physical activity. I like patterns and music. I'm interested in words and language. I like to fix things. I'm good with my hands. I have mechanical skills. I'm really good with people. I have social skills. There's something when you're very young that you're attracted to that is very powerful, right? It has nothing to do with thinking or words. It's something pre-verbal. You're drawn to it. Okay? And then when you get older, you stop hearing that voice. You lose contact with what makes you so different. And you start listening to other people. You listen to your parents who tell you need to get a job and make a lot of money. You listen to your friends who tell you what's cool. You listen to teachers. You listen to bosses. And you lose complete contact with that source of what makes you different from everybody else. And in Mastery, I talk about all these very successful, famous people, some of whom I interviewed for the book. And in each case, you can go back to that moment when they were 4 or 5 years old, and something happened where they go, wow, I'm so excited by this, right? It could be Martha Graham, the great dancer, the great choreographer, and how she just got entranced by physical movement when she was like 8 years old. Or Steve Jobs passing by a window where there were all these electronic things in there, and he's going, wow, how beautiful it is. I'd love to design those things, right? Or Albert Einstein getting a compass when he was 4 years old and marveling at the fact that something invisible was moving the needle on the compass. When you're a child, these things are very obvious. You're so drawn to them. You have to go back and you have to figure out what it is that you are so excited about that had that kind of power over you when you were very young. It's very complicated, Francesca. So if you're 19, it's very easy and much easier to go through this process. And it's very important that you do. By the time you're 30 and you haven't thought about it, it gets harder. If you're 40 or 50, it's almost too late. So it's better to begin figuring this out, figuring out who you are, figuring out what you love and what you're excited about. You know, if you love something, if you're interested in a subject, you learn and you absorb information much more quickly, much faster, right? Than if you decide to become a lawyer because your parents tell you that that's how you can make a lot of money, but you're not really interested, you're not really engaged. You're not going to learn at such a fast rate as opposed to, wow, I love music and this absorbs me. You're going to learn quickly. You're going to learn in 2 years what would take somebody 5 or 6 years to learn because they're not interested in it. So it's extremely important process to go through. And a lot of people come to me with this problem. They go, Robert, I can't figure out what my life's task is. And we have to go through a process that I could explain. That's quite involved. But it's a matter of digging into your past and digging into who you are and to the kinds of things that you love and the kinds of things that you hate. I don't know if that answers your question. I went kind of long.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a fascinating topic. I'd love to learn more about it. I think, what you mentioned about, going back to your childhood is so, so valuable. And it's true for me as well. And
well, tell me about yourself. What was that about yourself?
Well, first of all, I really liked asking questions. I've always been really curious and really fascinated by human psychology. And, I thought, okay, maybe I'll be a psychologist then, maybe I'll go down that path. But that was too limiting for me. And it wasn't using other skills because I also liked being on stage and acting. And so I kind of found this perfect path for myself where all these things that I like to do were combined, because now I'm like a psychology content creator and I have a podcast and I'm kind of acting on stage, but also, interviewing people like yourself. And, it kind of tied in really beautifully.
When did that all start to come together for you? When were you able, did you go through some moments where you weren't so keyed in on on this kind of thing? I mean, when did it happen for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for most of my life, I didn't know what my career path would look like. I guess kids nowadays,
Yeah,
they know they want to be an influencer or YouTuber, but when I was younger, it was still like the more traditional roles. Like, okay, you could work in marketing. It's not just doctor or lawyer, but you still have to kind of choose a career path. And it
yeah.
wasn't until maybe I was 18, 19 that, I found out like, okay, there's actually alternatives and you can make money from these things and that could be a career path. So it's super fascinating. I want to know also about you. Like when did you discover, this passion for writing and everything you do now?
Well, it's when I was probably about 8 years old or so, or even younger. I had this thing about words. I thought words were kind of like magic, and just the sound of words. I'm very a person that's very into the sounds of things, and I love hearing language. And when I write something, I'm always hearing it in my head first. And so words kind of obsessed me at a very early age. And then when I was about 8 years old, I started, we got this thing in school where you could, they gave you a pamphlet and you could buy these books if you put a little check by them, and there would be like, hundreds of book titles in there. They were for children, books for children. And I remember I ticked off about 80 of these books. My parents got really upset because 80 books were delivered. They had to pay for it. But I got so into reading. Suddenly reading became like this magical world. I mean, think of it. I tell people reading a book, if you think about what it is like magic. It is like a total process of enchantment. You're entering into the mind of another person who's weaving this, if it's fiction, weaving this imaginary world. And for a child, for me, it was like I was so in love with this. I wanted to be a writer. And then, like you, I couldn't figure out where exactly my writing would fit, right? It wasn't in journalism that I tried. I tried writing novels that didn't work. I got into Hollywood. I tried writing screenplays that didn't work. And then suddenly it clicked with writing a nonfiction book, with giving the chance to write the 48 Laws of Power. And then everything came together just like it did for you in podcasting. But the main thing is, I never gave up. I had a lot of pain. I didn't have success until I was almost 40 years old. And so, but I never gave up. I knew that this is what I was meant to do. I knew that I was different from other people in this one thing. And so I never had doubts. I just kept trying and trying and trying and trying.
That's incredibly inspiring. And I think a lot of people, they're in their 30s or 40s and they feel lost and they feel like I should have already found that thing or my
Yeah.
path and they haven't and they feel maybe like failures. And, it's so inspiring to hear a story like yours and know that no, you don't have to be in your 20s or 15 to find your life path. You could be 40, you could be 50, you could be much
Yeah.
older than that. So thank you so much
Yeah.
for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, like you, I had many different sides to my personality. I also liked kind of acting and performing and being out in public and stuff. I had many different interests. I liked fiction. I liked stories, but I also liked history. How can you possibly put all that together into one skill, into making money and having a living in life? That was the puzzle I couldn't solve. And finally,
Mm.
I solved it. There was also some luck involved, I have to admit. I met a man who was a book producer of books. He asked me for an idea for a book, if I had any, and I improvised the 48 Laws of Power. If I hadn't met him, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. So luck certainly intervenes in our career paths, right? But opportunities are always there for people. I don't know how your opportunity to do podcasts came about, but if you're ready, if the moment is right, you will seize that opportunity.
Absolutely. I love that. That's amazing. And just going back to talking about, the laws of power, I wanted to ask also, does power look differently for men versus women?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a lot harder for women, you know, because what they're judged by, the standards they're judged by, makes the game more difficult. So we should have much more respect in our culture for women who do make it, who are successful, because they have to go through so many more hurdles than a man does. So if a man is kind of tough and a little bit mean and a little bit hard, it's okay because that's part of being masculine. That's part of what goes with. But if a woman has these qualities, she's a bitch, right? And that's not seen, So women have to be so much more careful about the steps that they take, So some of the laws that I have in there are kind of strong. And if a woman uses them, she's going to be judged very negatively, whereas a man will be admired for those same qualities. So, but the thing is, women have skills. I mean, of course, we're generalizing here. It's absurd, but women have qualities that I think make them in some ways superior in the game of power to men. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that we're social animals. We're very political. People are tricky. They don't reveal who they are. They don't reveal what they're thinking. But women, at least traditionally, and maybe they're losing it now, I don't know, are much more sensitive to the social world. They're much more sensitive to the way they are raised, to what people are feeling, right? To what might be going on in their heads. They're more socialized. They're more sensitive to what's going on in a group. That kind of empathy, that kind of thinking inside of what's going on in people's minds is very, very powerful tool in the game of power. So whereas women have to jump through hurdles that make it more complicated and difficult for them, they have natural skills that in a group setting, as a leader or working in a group, can make them superior actors. Because men tend to be so involved in their egos and in their own worlds and in their own ideas and thoughts that they can be very insensitive and very coarse and not understand. If you're a leader and you're dealing with all these different people and you're not attuned to their different personalities, it can be very counterproductive. Women have a greater ability to tune into those kinds of things. I know I'm generalizing. But in the world today, where power is becoming more subtle and more difficult, that skill of understanding people, of being better at the social game, is, I think, a great advantage. So in some ways, in the future, I think women are going to be much more powerful. The game is going to equalize because right now it's not equal.
Maybe you should write 48 Laws of Power for Women next.
I've been asked to do that, but I'm a man, and I don't know these. I can get inside the experiences of other people. I get inside the experiences of animals. I'm an animal lover. I have cats, and I'm always thinking of what they're thinking and what's going on in their world. So I can imagine what it could be like to be a woman, but there are limits to that game. So for instance, I do know that in the moments of my life where people judged me for how I look, for the clothes that I wear, or for my hair or how I look, I hated that, man. I hated that. I found that so offensive and so upsetting to me. But then I think, God, women have to deal with that all of the time. That's like so much of their life. I couldn't endure that. It would drive me crazy. So if you think in terms of that, if you think of what women experience or what men experience if you're a woman, and try and imagine what their world is like, you can gain more insights into the difficulties or the problems or the advantages that they have.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's just always horrible and sad when people, are being offensive and judge you. And whether you're a man or women, because I feel like men are becoming more aware of how they look nowadays as well, with social media and everything. So it used to be more women, but men are equally, offended by these kind of things. And in the art of seduction, you talk about seduction archetypes. I was curious if there's also power archetypes. If, you mentioned power can look in different ways based on your gender. Are there some other power archetypes you could talk about?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think when I originally was doing the 48 Laws of Power, I was going to do something similar to that. I mean, you have people. So in the 48 Laws of Power, one of the types was seducers, and that's why I decided to write The Art of Seduction. So seduction is a form of power, is a form of soft power. Then you have people who are absolutely brilliant at the game of attention, right? A lot of that's in social media, influencers, etc. They know how to gain attention. Either it's by being ridiculous and clown-like, or it's by being very funny and humorous, or it's by saying things that are extremely interesting and provocative to people. So there's one law in there about court attention at all cost. So there are types of people who are absolutely brilliant at the attention game, right? Okay, so that's one thing. The seducers are the other type. Then there are people who are master manipulators. Okay, now gaining attention and being a seducer, involves some manipulation. But there are others who are just absolutely brilliant at that. And what that requires is the ability to think several moves in advance and also understand the weaknesses of the people around you. Okay? And so among the group of manipulators, I would classify two different types. They're the aggressive manipulators who know how to push people around, who know how to press certain buttons and get you upset and worried and anxious, and they know how to kind of manipulate your emotions. Then there are the clever, intriguing types who are much more political, and they think 3 moves in advance. So I'm working in this office. If I get this particular person interested in my idea, that could advance me a little further. Then they're going to connect me to this other person. They're thinking several moves in advance. They're very clever strategists. So there's the manipulators. They're the great strategists in the world. They're the attention seekers. There are the seducers. I don't know. I'm sure there are others, but those are some of the types that I would mention. If you give me time, Francesca, I could come up with 4 or 5 other types, but that should do for now.
That's absolutely fine. And it's super valuable to know about these types of power. And, talking about manipulation, I was curious, can you pinpoint some techniques that someone might be using on you to try to manipulate you?
Yes. Well, the main thing that you need to do, the main protection you need in life is to recognize the type of people who are manipulators before you get involved with them. So people who are malignant narcissists, for instance, and the game of people who are malignant narcissists is to infect your emotions, to gain control over your emotions, to create all kinds of drama where they're making you react, they're making you upset, and they're in complete control of that. Okay? So that's like one of the worst forms of manipulators that are out there. But once you get involved with someone like that, the way you can recognize that you're being manipulated is by the emotional reactions people are churning up that you cannot control. They're making you angry. They're making you upset. They're making you excited. And then that excitement changes into fear, into insecurity. You feel constantly emotional, like you're being played, right? But you don't realize it sometimes in the moment because when we get emotional, we don't think very well. We're not being very rational. So you can recognize it when people, by your reactions, by how emotional you are, and how it's constantly shifting. The problem is that by the time you realize that, it's almost too late, because you're so upset, you're so entangled in their power games, that it's very hard to get yourself out of it. So the best defense in this world is to recognize the manipulators before you get involved with them. First of all, you notice that they have a track record, that they've manipulated other people, that they have a lot of enemies in this world, right? If they have a lot of enemies in this world, that must mean something, okay? But you also are attuned to their body language, to the nonverbal communication cues that people give. When people look at you, their eyes reveal a lot. Their eyes reveal that they're actually interested, they're actually engaging. Manipulators have this kind of distance in their eyes, as if they're thinking, as you can hear them thinking. They're not like looking at you. They're kind of going, wow, what can I say to get this person interested in me? The eyes reveal a lot about whether people are outwardly focused or inwardly focused. And be very attuned to the body language, to what seems authentic and what is fake. I mean, these are some cues, but the most important thing is to be aware of your emotions and how you're being played and how they're constantly shifting because of all the drama that this person is stirring up.
That's very useful. And those are some really great signs to look out for. And I always think about it as a roller coaster. Sorry?
Have you ever dealt with someone who's a great manipulator?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Tell me about it.
Great social manipulator. It was a woman. It was a girl, actually. She was quite young, but she had this, since she was a baby, she had this ability. I think it was just narcissism, to be honest. And I don't use that term lightly. I don't like throwing it around, but I think she was actually, if there's one person in the world, she was definitely diagnosed with narcissism. And, you know, she could just take you on this roller coaster of emotions, from like hate to love to excitement to fear, everything you mentioned. And she could really control the group dynamic. So if she wanted someone excluded, she would make everyone else turn against the other person. And no one in the group actually liked her, but they were all kind of scared of her. And it wasn't like this was the boss or someone who had real power over other people, but the way she could manipulate people, honestly, it was impressive. You know, I didn't like her at all, but it was impressive. I was like, wow, this is crazy. So yeah, there's definitely people like that. And
it's amazing, as you say, what one person can do and how they can completely disrupt and dominate a group dynamic. You know, and you wonder, what is it about them, and what is that skill, or what are they doing that gives them that power? It's a fascinating subject. Why don't you like using the word narcissist?
I just think people nowadays throw it around. Overuse. Everyone's a narcissist. My mom's a narcissist. My dad's a narcissist. My boyfriend's a narcissist, you know, because they did one thing. And I think we're all narcissists to a degree or another. I think it's a spectrum. And then, you know, the people that are actually diagnosed with it, I think it was like 1 or 2% of the population, whereas everyone thinks everyone's a narcissist. So, you know, I think there's a difference. Like, sure, you can have narcissistic qualities or behaviors, or you can be more narcissistic and then you can be more selfless in different contexts. But yeah, I just don't like to throw that term around, you know, as easily as most people do.
Well, yeah.
Would you agree?
Yes, I do agree. In the Laws of Human Nature, I have a chapter on narcissism, and I say that we are all narcissists. We are all self-absorbed by our nature as human animals in the 21st century. It's unavoidable. that we think first and foremost of ourselves, that we're more interested in our own ideas than in other people's ideas. You know, it's natural and it's normal. But what happens is that you have people who are somewhat healthy with their narcissism, they're aware of it, and they have a degree of self-love and self-respect, so that when bad things happen to them and they start feeling depressed and low, they're able to raise themselves back up because they have a degree of self-love. So self-love is not a bad thing. It's actually a very good and powerful thing. And what happens with terrible narcissists, the 1%, I would say, to me, I think it's more like 5%, but who knows? It's just a number.
You're probably
Is
right.
when bad things happen and they start feeling upset and insecure, they don't have that self-love to raise them back up. The only way that they can feel okay about it is to start hurting other people, to start creating drama and getting attention. Instead of an internal voice that goes, "You're not so bad. Let's just wait it out. Things will get better." They go, "I'm so desperate. I'm so upset. I'm so angry. I have to get attention. I have to get other people. I have to manipulate other people." They cannot raise themselves back up. So to have some love for yourself, to have some self-esteem, is actually a very good and positive and powerful thing.
Absolutely. And I think that's an amazing way to differentiate people who are actually narcissistic, diagnosed, and then people who are just, normal and are just on the spectrum, narcissistic spectrum. And
Yeah, I think spectrum's a good word for it. Yeah.
and you mentioned seduction, and you said also
Yeah.
that manipulation is kind of part of it. I was wondering, what is seduction?
Well, seduction is a form of power. So, people have a weakness in life, okay? And the weakness that we all have, myself included, everybody on this planet, is that we don't have enough pleasure, okay? We don't have enough fun. We don't have enough excitement. We don't have enough theater and drama and things that raise us out of the banalities of everyday life. We're hungry for that, right? We have to work. We have to handle all the business things in our life. Life can be really drudgery and difficult and painful. And so that weakness is the fact that we want pleasure. We want to get out of our day-to-day world. We want to get out of the banalities that are weighing us down. So along comes a person, a man or a woman, or an animal, because animals seduce. And they say, all right, I'm going to give this person a taste of some pleasure, a taste of some thrill, a taste of some excitement. It could be sexual, but doesn't have to be sexual. It could be an adventure. Men are very much seduced by women who are offering an adventure because they like the thrill of the hunt. They like to chase. They like anything that has a little bit of danger involved. Okay. So what you're offering is something that people don't normally get in their day-to-day life. If you're a man or a woman and you know how to give people a taste of that pleasure and get them eating out of your hand and running after you, you are a master seducer or seductress. That is the art. It is knowing people's weakness and need to be taken out of their boring day-to-day life and playing on that to seduce them, to make them fall in love, to make them vote for you in an election, to sell them a product in marketing, whatever it is. It's all the same psychology.
So seduction is not just in the romantic context. It could be in any kind of context.
Of course. I mean, to win an election these days as a politician, you have to be really good at media, right? It's a new phenomenon. It wasn't necessarily like that 200 years ago. It's not that you're not just a good speaker, but you're good on television, you're good on social media, you're good, in any kind of image orientation, right? So you have to be a seducer. You have to know that voters are missing something. Usually in an election, what that is people want change. They're bored and they're tired with the same Labor Party, Republicans, Democrats. I want change. I want things different. You know how to appeal to that. You're a seducer. You're giving them something that they don't have. In marketing, you're figuring out audiences are so inundated with this particular approach. Here's a new approach that's going to get their attention, right? And make them excited. That's seduction. Okay? You're working in an office and you don't want to be sexually seducing people in your office, hopefully. Okay? But you know that people want to be liked. They want respect. They want validation. You want to feel that your ideas are great ideas. Well, that's what that person does in the work office. It's called a charmer. That's one of the types of seducers. They know how to make you feel great about yourself. That's a seduction. Social, political, sexual, marketing, it's all the same.
Very interesting. So besides the charmer, what are the other archetypes of seduction?
Well, starting at the beginning, there's the siren. So I maintain in the art of seduction that it is women that invented the art of seduction, and the most ancient archetypes of seduction are women. And the siren is the preeminent female seductress. And it has a very physical component to it. A siren has a very powerful sexual energy that isn't obvious. It's not like they go around naked or anything, but it's in their aura. I often, when I'm watching a movie and I'm looking at actresses, I can feel it in them. I don't know what it is exactly, but I know one of the archetypes that I talk about is Marilyn Monroe. And Marilyn Monroe would literally make love to the camera. She wanted you to love her, right? And so she was so vulnerable and so open. And that gave her that kind of siren presence. But it's a sort of physical quality that only really a man can appreciate, because the siren is a powerful seductress of men. A man feels that energy in the woman and is really drawn to it. Also, sirens are very theatrical. They create a lot of drama. They create fantasy. Like Cleopatra was creating incredible fantasies. So that's the siren. On the flip side is the male seducer, because all the other types can be male or female, but these two types are generally one or the other, is the rake. That's the most primal, powerful form of male seduction, is the rake. And the rake is a man who really understands and really likes women. He's very interested in women. He was probably had sisters and had a strong mother, and he was around women. He likes them. He appreciates them. He understands their psychology, their needs. The thing is, he's never satisfied by one woman. It's after a couple of months, he's on to somebody else, okay? But in those 2 months that a rake is interested in you, no woman can resist him, because he fills you with so much attention that's so focused on you. And it's not like creepy attention. It's not like a stalking attention. It's loving, romantic attention that you don't get from any other man, because men are so interested in their work and their business. They don't care about women's things. This man is all focused on you. He understands you. He's giving you what you want. No woman can resist it. And men who are rakes are also very good with words, because words are the woman's weakness. A man who can speak well, who can weave stories and poetic things with his tongue, is extremely seductive, right? For men, it's appearances, it's visuals, it's that sexual energy. For women, a lot of it revolves around words and ideas and thoughts and concepts and fantasies that a man can evoke. That is the rake, right? No man can resist a siren, and no woman can resist a true rake. The other types are like the dandy, which is a type of man or woman who has qualities of the opposite sex, the other gender. So it's a man with a touch of femininity It's a woman with a touch of masculinity. And believe it or not, that has very, very powerful sexual and social appeal to people. I could go into why that is, but that's a very powerful type. There is the natural, which is somebody who has a very childlike ability. They're spontaneous. They may be in their 20s, but you have the feeling that they're 5 years old. They're so real and natural and spontaneous and kind of helpless and vulnerable. You go, wow, that's lovable. I want to, I want that person. There's the coquette, which traditionally is a woman, but can be a man, is the one who plays hot and cold. They're suddenly so excited about you. Their eyes will go, wow, there's something going on there. And then the next minute they're all cold and distant, and they've completely wrapped you around your finger by this pattern of coldness and hotness. There are a few others, but I don't want to exhaust the list. That gives you an idea.
Super interesting. Yeah,
Do
thank you
want me
so
to go
much
through
for
the whole list?
No, that was good enough. And yeah, I
Okay,
think,
okay.
but those are kind of most of them, right? So that
Yeah,
was
there are a
really,
few left.
really
There's like 5 or 6 of the 9, yeah.
very interesting. And for someone who's listening right now and
Yeah.
they're thinking, this sounds amazing, but they don't necessarily feel seductive, or they don't feel like they have any of those qualities, or they don't feel like they're attracting someone. Is there a way for someone to cultivate this magnetic, seductive aura?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do they do
It's
it?
very simple. I mean, there are many different ways to get there, but there's one path that is the most powerful of all. And that is to be more interested in other people. So what makes you unseductive, what I call anti-seductive, is that you're so self-absorbed. You're only thinking about yourself. You're insecure. You're worried about what people think about you. You're constantly going, am I saying the right things to this woman in the bar? Is she bored? You're so wrapped up in your own thoughts that you're not paying attention. The ability to get outside of yourself, and you can practice this. The problem nowadays is everything is virtual. You're swiping to find somebody. You need to practice this on people in the world and not virtually, okay? And the practice is this: thinking about them. So if I were interested in you, Francesca, right now, just as a scenario, right? And I was trying to seduce you, okay? And we were in a restaurant or a bar, I'd be focusing on who you are, what your world is like. I would be asking questions that aren't obvious, but that show that I'm interested in your world, how you think, what's going on with you, what was your childhood like? I get you to talk about yourself. People never feel like they're the star of the show. They never feel like they get to talk about themselves. You get the other person to talk because you're focused on them. You're not focused on yourself, right? I'm interested in you. I'm interested in what makes Francesca tick. What were her horrible experiences with boyfriends in the past and why? I'm trying to get inside of your world and think like you think so I can understand what it is that you're missing in life, okay? What makes people bad at the game is they can't get inside of other people. They're so locked in their heads. They're can only think about what they need, what they want, what they think is funny or what they think is interesting. But you have to think of what the other person finds interesting. I have this famous quote that I'm going to mangle terribly in The Art of Seduction, where in England in the 19th century, there were these two political rivals, Benjamin Disraeli, who was a great prime minister, and this other man, I can't remember what his name was, Goldsmith, maybe, Gold something or other. Sorry. And Disraeli was the master seducer, and this woman, this princess or whatever, was at a party, an evening with them, and she said, sitting next to Mr. Goldsmith, whatever his name was, I thought he was the most interesting man in the world. Sitting next to Mr. Disraeli, I thought I was the most interesting person in the world. That is what charm, that is what seduction is. So you're not
Mm.
trying to impress people with how brilliant you are. You're trying to make them feel brilliant. You're trying to make them feel wonderful and great, not you. Get out of yourself, get out of your world, get out of your own problems and get inside other people, inside their minds. Ask questions. And then, this is a very brilliant seduction technique. When somebody says something that seems kind of interesting or telling, the next day or later that evening, you come back to them and you quote what they were saying in some context. What this reveals is that you were listening to them, that you retained something that they said that was very personal, and you've quoted it back to them, not in an obvious way, but it reveals indirectly that you were truly listening to them. Man, that is powerful because people don't listen to each other anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. And I think a lot of women are complaining about that. They're going on dates and they feel like the guy hasn't asked them any questions or they only talked about themselves. And, it seems like a simple ask, like, please just ask me some questions, but you'd be surprised how little it
Well,
actually happens.
well, that's
So,
men's weakness when it comes to seduction. They talk too much about themselves. It's a
hmm.
terrible quality.
Are there any, you mentioned some anti-seductive qualities. Are there other habits that maybe people are doing unconsciously that are anti-seductive?
Well, one quality is moralizing and judging, and always judging other people and judging them for what they said and judging them for what they look and judging from the clothes that they wear and judging them for their friends and their political opinions. That is completely unseductive. Being moralizing and superior, that will put anybody off, okay? Being so insecure that you're always worried about what you're going to say and whether you're pleasing people, we can read that kind of insecurity on people. It's very anti-seductive, insecurity. The lack of generosity. So if you're a man, I'm being very traditional here, so I don't know, it's probably not very good for the 21st century. But pay the money, pick up the bill. Don't be tight. Don't be such a tightwad. Don't be having always to split the bill. Pay for things. Give generous gifts. But not just material things. Be generous with your attention, right? So you're somebody that's always involved in your business and your work and you have no time for your partner or the person you're trying to seduce. Do the opposite and be generous with the time that you give them. If the woman, for instance, if it's a man or woman, the woman knows that you're very busy, okay? But if suddenly you take off a complete day and you say, let's just go off and do our things and let's just be together for that whole day, that's powerful. You're being generous with your spirit. You're being generous with your time. That is, lack of that is a very anti-seductive quality. Those are some of them. Once again, I could go
Yeah.
through all 10, but I'm just going to leave it at that for now.
Yeah, I think those are
It's a fun
so
subject,
spot
though.
on. Yeah, absolutely. And I can so much resonate
I
with
mean,
that. And
the one I left out, what I kind of mentioned, is the talker, the big talker, the person that's always bragging and saying, God, I was so great, and look at all the wonderful things I've done, and all the people that have been interested in me, and all the things I've accomplished, and how many books I've written, and how fantastic, and how many followers I have on Instagram. Man, that is really anti-seductive.
yeah, absolutely. And also, you mentioning generosity, I think it applies to both
Yeah,
men and women.
sure.
And, even if you, for instance, I remember going out with this like girl, just like as friends. And I think it was like we met at the book club and then we went for a coffee. And at the end, she picked up the bill and like she paid for it. And I was like, wow, that had never happened to me before with a woman, like a friend has never really paid for my coffee before. And I really appreciated that. It really made me like her more. And then the other example is, I don't know what it is about the UK, but on birthdays, people don't bring you gifts, Whereas where I'm from, which is Romania, people always bring you thoughtful, really
Romania.
nice gifts, and they
Romania.
pay for
Yeah.
things and they invest money and time. And then it was such a shock to see, I made some British friends and they came to my birthday and they came empty handed. And I had to adjust to this culture,
When is
but
your birthday,
it's
Francesca?
on the 28th of March.
20th of March?
28th.
20th,
28th.
28th of March.
Yeah.
Okay, I have friends with that. So you're an Aries.
Yes, I'm an
Yeah.
Aries. How about you? When's your
Well,
birthday?
May 14.
So are you a
Taurus.
Taurus? Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
very cool. So
Um,
yeah, I
well,
think,
yes.
it really
Well,
puts you off
uh,
when people aren't being
on the
generous.
on the subject of gifts, gifts are a very important topic in the art of seduction. And what you must understand is the power of a gift isn't necessarily in the money that you've spent on it. It's in the thoughtfulness of it. And the thoughtfulness is you're giving them something that appeals to them as an individual. This is the other thing about seduction that you need to understand. Back in the early 2000s, we had this big thing about the pickup artist, right? Particularly in Los Angeles, the game, playing the game. Men knew all these techniques for how to seduce women. The problem was that it wasn't geared towards a woman who, as an individual, her specific needs. It was just this kind of general strategies that you applied. And women could see through it. It was very off-putting. So you're dealing with people as an individual. You, Francesca, have your own needs, your own interests, your own peculiar tastes. If I give you a gift that shows I understand who you are as an individual, I give you some music that I know is your taste, or I give you not just flowers, not just the general cliched stuff, but something that shows that I was listening to you, that I understand you, that the gift is personal. It's not just that it was expensive, but that there was some thinking going on in it. That is the more seductive, powerful way to give a gift.
Absolutely. And women really appreciate that. Probably men as well,
Yeah.
but I'd say particularly
Men do
women.
too. Men do
Yeah.
too.
Very interesting. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, you mentioned charm and charisma. Are charisma and seduction the same thing, or are they different?
Well, one of the types of seducers that I did not mention was the charismatic. So it's definitely a form of seduction. And the idea is, backing up a little bit here, seduction and the art of seduction is a language. It's a language that you are learning. It's not a language of words. It's a language of actions. It's a language of your body, of how you present yourself. It's how you dress, how you look, how you smell. It's a pre-verbal language that you have to learn. It's about giving gifts. It's about where you take people, okay? So we humans are very attuned to people's nonverbal communication, to their body language. We pick it up. It's the animal part of ourselves, right? And it's very powerful and it's very seductive, okay? So a charismatic has very, very, very powerful body language. And what is that? They believe something so strongly. They're so certain about something powerful about their world or what they want that it radiates to them. It's like there's a light bulb inside of them that you can't see, but that animates all their gestures, their eyes, their mouth, their expression. They seem alive. It's almost a slight sexual energy, but it's this energy of self-belief, of confidence, of wanting people to like them, right? This is the kind of power that a Marilyn Monroe had before the camera. And it's extremely powerful. You can read it in people, right? So it's very important for political